Friday, April 27th, 2018. It's time for Progressive Washington with Rhonda, Courtney, and Brian.
Welcome to Progressive Washington. I'm Rhonda Walker.
And I'm Courtney Love.
We don't have Brian with us today. We're used to talking to him and bringing him in. He's out in the audience, I believe, though. So thank you for tuning in, everybody. We appreciate everybody checking us out. Please don't forget to share this out. And then if you have any questions, make sure you, in all capital letters, type out question, and then go ahead and put your question in after that. How are you doing today, Courtney?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm very excited about today's show.
So am I. We've got somebody very special on today, which you will be talking to, right?
Indeed.
Kshama Sawant. She is a Seattle City Councilwoman, and she's going to be talking about taxing Amazon today. And then a little bit later, I'll be talking about our Senate race. So Senate scrutiny. Does Cantwell vote well? So look forward to that. So we do have Kshama with us right now. I'd love to go ahead and get right into this interview. Are you ready to take that away, Courtney?
Indeed. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Today we're joined by Kshama Sawant, City Council member, and who ran and won as a socialist in Seattle, which is a very interesting discussion in and of itself. But today we're here to talk about taxing Seattle businesses, the top 3% in employee hours tax. Thank you for joining us, Kshama. How are you today?
Thanks for having me. Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you. And I am going to just dive in here and ask, just lay the groundwork a little bit. Is this an income tax?
This is a tax on the biggest and the most profitable businesses of Seattle to help address the acute crisis in affordable housing and the exploding homelessness in our city. And as you know, this is not just a Seattle-specific problem. The lack of affordable housing and the homelessness crisis has now become a Puget Sound-wide problem. And indeed, it is a nationwide problem. It has really now come down to a question of who gets to occupy urban spaces. Is it going to be only the very wealthy and the biggest corporations like Amazon? Or is it going to be ordinary working people who go to work every single day and make our cities run? So we're talking about a tax on corporations like Amazon, the top 3 to 4% of the corporations who need to pay something close to their fair share. And this is a modest tax. We're talking about raising $150 million every year, which would enable the city to build up to 750 publicly owned, permanently affordable housing units, and also allow us to greatly expand homeless services.
Have you already decided if that will be a public or a public-private partnership? The low-income housing, is further ahead?
Right. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Speaking as an economist, I can tell you I've done a lot of research on these so-called public-private partnerships, and statistically speaking, what they actually mean is when you have this so-called public-private partnership, the public pays and the private makes enormous profits at the expense of the public. So what I am talking about, and what Socialist Alternative, the activist organization I'm a part of, and our movement to tax Amazon and the Affordable Housing Housing Alliance, the coalition that we're building, what we are talking about, what our movement is talking about, is specifically social housing or publicly owned housing, because we know not only has the market, the so-called supply and demand logic, failed us completely in creating affordable housing units, but we also know that if housing units that are temporarily affordable but then get reverted to private landlords, Wall Street speculators, big housing management corporations, then the writing is on the wall. You know, what happens is that rents skyrocket and only the very wealthy, upscale people are able to live in them, and people get pushed out. We want to reverse the displacement and gentrification that's happening in our city, but in a permanent way. We're not talking about just allowing people to have a 5 or 10-year reprieve. We're talking about people's right to live in our urban areas.
Well, and who you mentioned who has the right to occupy urban space? Is there an answer to that? Do you have, or is that a rhetorical question?
I don't. Unfortunately, it is not at all a rhetorical question. It's a real question. If you look at the entire national landscape, what we're seeing is in the last 10 years, especially since the technical end of the Great Recession, what we've seen is that the very corporations, the big banks, the real estate companies that were responsible in precipitating a massive financial collapse that took its toll, just historic toll on ordinary working people, are the very ones who are making hand over fist profit since the recession ended. And the rest of us are facing permanently reduced standards of living. So throughout the nation, we're seeing metropolitan areas, all the way from Vancouver, BC in Canada to LA in California, Chicago, New York City, Houston. All of these cities are facing a massive housing crisis, meaning to different degrees, meaning that only the very wealthy or households with very high incomes can afford to live in them. And what we're seeing is increasingly an exodus of working people from the city to away from the city. So in Seattle, what we're seeing, and again, we're seeing this in virtually every other city, which is that working people who have to come into the city every day to work, because these are the people who make the city run. Make no mistake, it's not the billionaires and Jeff Bezos who makes the city run. Seattle runs because of the hundreds of thousands of people who go to work every day as childcare workers, teachers, custodial workers, parking garage attendants, the people who work in the service sector at Safeways and QFCs and so on. So we're talking about the ordinary working people without whom the city would come to a grinding halt. But these are the people who are having to face longer and longer commutes because they're getting pushed out of the city limits. And nationally, what we're seeing is a statistical connection between increasing homelessness and the skyrocketing rents. A recent study from the Journal of Urban Affairs found that for every $100 increase in median rent, this was causally associated with a double-digit increase in homelessness. So not only are we seeing working people being pushed out of the city and farther away from their place of work, we're seeing people pushed into homelessness. And that is why increasingly the people in Seattle, ordinary people in Seattle, have been experiencing, homelessness in a very personal level. Either yourself or a family member or somebody you know really well, your close friend or your neighbor who's about to face homelessness. So there is increasing support for the city to do something about it. But Seattle is a progressive city. But the thing that we need to be noting here, and it's relevant to your next segment about Maria Cantwell as well, is that the political options that are on offer through the Democratic establishment, and Seattle is a Democratic establishment controlled city, these political options are well to the right of what working people want. Working people in Seattle are well to the left of what is on offer. And that is why I see my role on the city council as not just somebody who's having backroom conversations with other city council members, trying hard to convince them, but really building a movement out on the streets, because that is that movement that is putting pressure on the city council right now. And so what's interesting is that only a few months ago, during the People's Budget movement we built in November last year, the majority of the council voted against a tax like this. And here we are, where the council is, many of the council members are now under intense pressure to pass something this year. So this shows that actually building independent, defiant movements actually wins victories.
Okay. And then what kind of influence does big business have on the Seattle City Council?
I think that's a very, very important point to take into consideration, because, a lot of people are very clear about the corporate influence in the White House, obviously in US Congress. For decades, working people across America have been clear about the deep pockets that corporate lobbyists have to target both parties. And certainly there are differences between the Republican and the Democratic establishments. But one thing that they share in common is their allegiance to Wall Street interests. But something that many people may not be aware of because they're not engaged in local politics is that it's the same equation at the city and the county and the state level as well. So what we see is corporations like Amazon, like Nucor Steel, like the Washington Restaurant Association, the Washington Hotel Association, the landlord lobby, all of these have a lot of power in City Hall and in the county and state governments. And the reality is that they don't need to build movements. They don't need to come out and rally and protest on the street. They can quietly, as a private conversation, talk to the council members or the other politicians that they have paid into through campaign donations and call the price for it. And so it's no surprise that, for example, Mayor Jenny Durkin, who's a Democrat, who is a woman and a lesbian, last year in her mayoral race, Amazon alone, she was a very heavily corporate funded candidate, but Amazon alone threw down $350,000 for her campaign. It's no surprise that Jenny Durkin, in private meetings that she's holding right now, is coming out very strongly against 75 million even. I mean, we're calling for 150 million per year. What she's saying that even 75 million, half of that is too much. And so the power that corporations and corporate lobbyists have is not immediately visible, but we should understand that in a deeply unequal society, wealth equals power. So if you have a corporation like Amazon, for example, that makes $5.6 billion of profit last year, with Jeff Bezos being the richest man in the world with $100 billion of wealth, he doesn't need to show up at the city council public hearing. He has these politicians in their pockets. That is why that's the only explanation for why when Amazon said, we're going to look for other city to be the HQ too, these council members, rather than calling Amazon out for this this open sort of economic blackmail of our city, instead wrote a craven letter to Amazon saying, we would like to hit the refresh button. I'm so sorry if you felt unwelcome in Seattle because of our progressive laws. When was the last time these council members sent a letter to Seattle's renters saying, I'm so sorry you felt unwelcome because of the skyrocketing rents? Never.
Absolutely. And thank you for that. And it leads me to a quote that I saw from Marilyn Strickland on the Seattle Chamber of Commerce. And I'm in Tacoma. I don't know if you know that, but she used to be my mayor. And it's not something I would have chosen to export. So sorry about that. Yes. But I saw that she made comment at a meeting recently, and it was, please use the resources you already have that are abundant. Do you have abundant resources?
Well, it's a question of the problem we're facing and the scale of that problem. So if you just look at the dollar figure in isolation from everything else in the universe, it might seem, even to innocent people, just ordinary working people, as a lot of money. But if you look at both the scale of the expanding problem of homelessness and the crisis of affordable housing, and if you compare how much the city is spending to how much the city spends on the police department and on corporations, it is a minute figure. So it is completely disingenuous of Marilyn Strickland, who she does not have a problem of math comprehension. What she has is political loyalty to the big business class. And so it's no surprise that as a spokesperson for the Chamber of Commerce, this is what she's saying, that, already abundant resources. I would counterpose that by first noting that the Chamber of Commerce is not an organization that represents the interests of your local struggling immigrant-owned business that is also in many ways vulnerable to the powers of big business. She represents an organization that has Amazon, Microsoft, Macy's, the biggest corporations at their head. These are the interests that she represents. If you want to talk about abundant resources, I'll give you an example of abundant resources. Amazon, as the IRS found in 2016, had not reported its tax obligations accurately, and the IRS ordered Amazon to pay well over $1 billion of back taxes or deferred taxes. But last year, Trump and the Republicans, and the Democrats didn't really wage an effective fight against this. Trump and the Republicans gave a historic $1.8 trillion corporate tax cut, through which, because of a grandfather clause, Amazon now is exempted from paying $789 million of those deferred taxes. If you want to talk about abundant resources and indeed shameless and disgraceful amounts of money thrown away, it's at big business. It's at the super wealthy. It's at the top 0.01% who have leached the society to a degree where now in the wealthiest country in the history of humanity, America, you are seeing historic levels of poverty, homelessness, low wage job, student debt, and tens of millions of people just struggling to get by. That is the inequality we should be pointing out.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so now that we've painted a picture of the issue, why do we need to get involved? You mentioned the other day a collective dignity of society, and I just thought that was, it really resonated in me, and I'd like to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point you raised, Courtney, because if you look at everywhere in the country and actually worldwide, we're looking at really literally billions of people who go to work every single day. And it's a complete sort of contradiction of this myth that if people are poor or if people are struggling, it's because they did something wrong in their lives, or they're lazy, or they're drug addicts, or they're just problem people. But the reality is a complete denial of this mythology. The reality is that billions of working people around the world, people of all races, go to work every single day and have very little to show for it. And that is why it's not just the United States. You're seeing a struggle for affordable housing and a decent living standards happening everywhere in the world. And I think what's really at the heart of it, what's really bringing people out into the struggle and refusing to accept this status quo of massive inequality is not only jobs and demands for public education and decent standards of living, but really an underlying question of our dignity as human beings and the vision for human society that we want to have. I mean, most people I know, and I'm very confident, are not willing to accept and do not want to accept the vision of society as it is presented to us right now, which is a society where millions of people will go to work every day and yet struggle to get by and get pushed deeper and deeper into poverty. And so when we talk about the movement for housing justice in Seattle or Portland or Vancouver, BC, or the Bay Area, or we talk about the movement of the teachers in West Virginia, Oklahoma, now Arizona, Colorado, they are not only fighting for their jobs and for better pay, they are fighting for their dignity as workers, for a vision of a different kind of community. And what they're also showing, and what we're showing through our housing movement, is that we cannot put our faith in politicians, and we have to see through the fact that many of these politicians, including Maria Cantwell, will say nice words, will say, yes, I agree with you, we need to deal with this, we need to deal with that, we need to address this and that. But at the end of the day, their primary loyalty lies to their Wall Street and billionaire masters. And if we want to subscribe to a different kind of vision, and we should be proud if we want to subscribe to a different kind of vision, a vision of a better society, then we should not only not be apologetic about it, but recognize that it is worth fighting for, and that it will not be won if we put our faith in these politicians, and that working class people, ordinary people, have renters, homeless people, students, workers, have to build our own organizations and fight our own battles independent of the people at the top. And that when we fight, we can win. The West Virginia teachers showed that. They went on a 9-day wildcat strike in a state dominated by Republicans and the right wing, in a state where going on strike is illegal for public sector workers. But they did that. And in fact, they even pushed back against the cautiousness of the higher up labor leaders and said, no, you know what, this is worth fighting for, and we can fight for it, and we can win. And now we saw yesterday 50,000 teachers walking out in Phoenix. The whole city was a sea of red with their Red for Ed signs and Red for Ed t-shirts. We should draw real inspiration from this. And that is the same principle we're using for the housing struggle in Seattle. We are not relying on these corporations. Our tax Amazon movement is going, building its power independently, and it has only gained in momentum.
Excellent. And that leads me to ask, how do we fight and win?
The only way we can fight for these social gains and win is if we, first of all, if we recognize, one, that this is worth fighting for, that we can actually come together, get organized, and make social change happen for real, and also learn from history. I mean, we have seen through, over and over again what we have seen through the struggle for marriage equality, through the struggle for a $15 minimum wage, and all the struggles for renters' rights that we have won in Seattle, the teachers, as I mentioned, in West Virginia. What we have shown is that if we get organized from below and understand that the forces that are on our side are ordinary people like ourselves who are also getting short-ended by the system, and that our allies are not the Democratic Party politicians, certainly not the Republican Party politicians, and understanding that we need to build our movements independently of them, I think that is a crucial part of our clarity, our political clarity, to be able to build movements that can win. And also, I think we have to build our confidence in pushing back against big business mythology. Just to give you a concrete example, right now, as we are fighting to tax corporations like Amazon, we have people like Madeline Strickland and other representatives of big business saying that this tax we are fighting for is a tax on jobs. That is nonsense. I'm an economist. I know that they're completely wrong about this, and they know that they're wrong about it, but they're using this rhetoric because they know that building these lies, if working people don't push back against us, those lies become reality because there's nothing to counter it. We should confidently be countering these lies and not accepting this logic that if you fight for taxes on big business, if you fight for better wages, big businesses will move out of the city. We get this threat over and over again. So I hope that this message resonates with working people who are watching this in every city. It's not just in Seattle. What we have shown through the Fight for 15 in Seattle, the historic Fight for 15 in 2014, is that rather than accept this logic of the race to the bottom, that is, people in all cities should accept lower living standards, because if we fight against big business, somehow, they're going to leave. But they're going to leave and go where? They're going to go to other cities where working people are not fighting back. So what's the alternative? The alternative is for working people to fight in every city and for them to understand that they are in solidarity with us and we are with them. And the example of 15 is really inspiring and instructive, because rather than exporting low-wage jobs throughout the country, what we did is export the 15 Now campaign, the 15 Now message. And after Seattle won 15, a number of other cities like LA and Minneapolis won 15, and nationwide, the same day that Trump was elected, there were minimum wage increases that were passed. This shows that there is a hunger and a desire to fight back, but people need to get organized. As individuals, we are nothing, but when we get organized as a movement, we can change the balance of power, even though it seems like a David and Goliath fight, but we can push back against big business and we can win.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm just scrolling through our chat here to see if there are any questions.
There's actually a really cool statement by the Revolution Continues blog. Yeah. We need more wildcat strikes. Workers need to unite and stand up for their rights. We need to rattle the cages of the 1%. Sorry, that stood out. I thought it was beautiful.
Thank you.
And there was one question. Wanted to know if we've discussed Bernie's jobs program. What do you think about that, if you've been able to review that yet?
Unfortunately, I haven't been able to review it closely, but if it's anything like what I have already seen coming from the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016 and the overall message about working people building their own power and fighting for better unionized living wage jobs, then I imagine I would totally support it.
Thank you. And then another one here is, how do you keep the momentum, say if Amazon does leave?
Well, first of all, just if I might speak as an economist, I don't see any evidence from statistical analysis from previous situations that when you pass a tax on wealthy people, millionaires, as we did in Seattle last year, or if you pass a tax on big business, that because of that business will leave. It is not, it doesn't work that way. And as a matter of fact, the reality is actually quite different. And so allow me to illustrate that with a concrete example. Boeing, which is another powerful corporation, and one of the corporations given Washington's regressive tax system actually pays a negative tax, meaning if you count all the subsidies that they get from the city from working people's taxpayer money, they actually get more than what they return to working people in the city, to the state coffers. Boeing has decade after decade carried out an economic blackmail at the state level by saying that if you don't give us this or that corporate handout, we will take the jobs away. And keep in mind, I'm not talking about Boeing workers. I'm talking about the Boeing executives and billionaire shareholders. They have held our city hostage for decades by this logic. And in 2013, actually, just weeks after I won my own first election in November, the state legislature, including Governor Inslee, ended up capitulating in a shameful way to giving Boeing what turned out to be the largest ever single corporate handout in U.S. history, nearly $9 billion. And that was based on this logic that if we don't give Boeing what it wants, then it will take jobs away. Do you know what happened after that corporate handout? Boeing moved the jobs anyway. Because the reason Boeing moved jobs is not because you didn't give them the corporate tax handout. The reason Boeing will move jobs is because of the logic of capitalism, which is that as long as there is another region where workers are worse off than us and are more desperate and poorer than us, where they are beaten down and they are willing to accept substandard working conditions, accept lower wages, as long as there are regions like that around the country and around the world, jobs will move. So whether it is South Carolina or Mexico or Bangladesh, that is what we have seen under capitalism decade after decade. This is a global system, and big corporations have the power to move jobs, and they will carry out this age-old divide and rule strategy where they will pit workers from South Carolina, for example, against workers in Washington and say, you got to duke it out amongst each other, and we will get the, no matter which of you wins, we will get the big prize, because what you're subscribing to is what I said, the logic to the race to the bottom. As long as you accept that that working people in one state have to compete for lower wages, imagine that, lower wages and worse conditions for ourselves against another state. As long as we accept that, the corporations will, no matter where the jobs stay or go. And so the lesson from Boeing and the lesson from a study of capitalism is that the only way to reverse this race to the bottom is to reject this divide and rule strategy and understand that the interests of workers in Washington are intricately tied to the interests of the workers in South Carolina, and that what we need to do is not only build movements for taxing big business for higher wages in one state, but we need to do that in all states and really fight back everywhere. And in fact, the red state teacher rebellion is showing exactly what I'm talking about in practice, which is that if workers fight for and win, show that defiance and the real courage to withstand pressure. And that's not easy. Going on a 9-day strike is not easy. So let's commend the workers for their courage and the way they sustain themselves with determination and with solidarity from the community. But what happened because of that, they didn't just win their own demands. What they did is just really inject the contagion of confidence in workers in other states. And now we're seeing this red state teacher rebellion. When West Virginia workers first went on strike, everybody thought they were being, they were being hasty and they were being foolhardy and that this was going to come back and bite them. But instead, if you have the courage and the staying power and the organizational ability to build a real movement that stays together and works together, then you can actually have this spreading of struggle in city after city. And that is the only way. If workers fight back in every city, we'll be able to push back against big business.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it reminds me, this isn't a left versus right or a Washington versus Alabama. This is a top versus bottom.
It is a top versus bottom. And if I might just quickly clarify that, I think it is critical that we all, and I know you agree, you would agree with this, it is critical that we be very clear on the left. We have to be very clear against racism, sexism, misogyny, homophobia, anti-immigrant hysteria, and we should hold the line on that. But to your point, the red state rebellion and the reception that Bernie Sanders' politics has received in these southern states that went for Trump shows that it is precisely when the left fails to build itself among working class people that the right gains currency. So I don't believe that the majority of working people in America are right wing. But what does happen is that when the left fails to build itself, the right wing starts getting an echo because it becomes the vessel of people's frustrations. And that is what we have to counter. People can be won over into the left, but it has to be done on the correct basis. And that is why it's no surprise to me that you're seeing among the 50,000 teachers and community members who walked out yesterday in Arizona, there were people who carrying signs or wearing T-shirts that said that I voted for Trump and I'm supporting and I'm red for Ed. So it shows that a lot of people who ended up voting for Trump didn't do so because they are inherently and irrevocably right-wing. They did so because they are angry and frustrated at corporate domination in politics. They're looking for a way out. They're looking for an alternative. But because the left didn't build itself, because there was a lot of trust put in the Democratic establishment and Sanders lost the nomination as we had correctly predicted, and you had a corporate candidate named Hillary Clinton, who obviously is different from Trump, but did not offer what working people were looking for, which was an alternative against corporate domination. And so Trump ended up taking advantage. Trump is a con man and a liar, and he ended up taking advantage of the frustrations of working people. So this should be a warning. If we don't want the right wing to build itself and right wing ideology to take root among working people, then the left needs to urgently build itself.
That's right. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. Are there any other questions?
No other questions, just everybody very excited to hear these words. There's another statement on here. I mean, just somebody said, race to the bottom. That describes our current world. It's time to race to the top and put the workers first.
That's right.
So, there we go.
That.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Councilwoman, and we look forward to working with you in the struggle.
I look forward to that as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
What a beautiful interview.
I agree. Are you?
I can listen to her forever.
I know. I was like, do you really need to do anything else today? But yes, we have very important business. All of our business is important.
She's a badass.
Yes.
So.
That was one of the easiest interviews you'll ever do. Just set her up and let her go because she's a real powerful speaker. Well done.
Oh, I still got chills I'm trying to shake off. It was just beautiful.
Now, to everybody listening out there, just imagine if we had her on the pirate ship, the Progressive HQ that I know we have a link to somewhere in the description of this video. And imagine that being blasted on the stage, the upper deck of the ship, and we've got a band, and she's giving a speech, and we're right parked in front of an LNG port. All we need is your donations. I'm just going to throw that out right there. I'm going to make this happen. We're going to make this happen.
We are.
All right. Sorry for interrupting,
Thank you,
guys.
Well, thank you.
Anytime, John. Thank you very much. Okay, so I guess.
Are you ready, Rhonda?
I guess so. I'll get my game face on now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was wonderful, Courtney. Beautiful interview. Thank you so much.
It's so hard to take credit for anything. I just sat there and smiled.
I did too in the background. I was just like, whew. Oh, yeah. So Senate scrutiny. Does Cantwell vote well? So
I love that title.
Right, yeah. So our senator is no progressive. Maria Cantwell calls herself a pro-business Democrat. So she's no friend of the workers. So pro-business is just that. We are just a few points. Those are just a few points I wish to make clear today. So during Senator Cantwell's tenure in Congress, she has voted to send working people to war and to condemn them to an economic race to the bottom with free trade agreements. She has not supported public education with any real sincerity, as the threat of privatization of education is being shoved at the public by for-profit companies. She will not support universal health care. Instead, she supports the for-profit insurance market model that keep bankrupting people across the nation, while supporting the for-profit taxpayer-subsidized Affordable Care Act that she still leaves over 28 million people uninsured. Cantwell opposes Medicare for all. Under Obama, she helped defeat the inclusion of a public option as an alternative to private insurance within the Affordable Care Act. Now, under Trump, she even refuses to support a bill that would allow U.S. residents to buy cheaper medicines from Canada. All right. Cantwell is part of the conservative wing of the Democratic Party, which itself has been moving steadily rightward. She long ago adopted Bill Clinton's policy of third-way centricism and its agenda of shrinking government, reducing social services, touting equal economic opportunity, and instead of affirmative action and getting tough on crime. She voted yes to Guantanamo Bay prison to leaving it open, reauthorizing the Patriot Act in 2006, and extended FISA to allow increased wiretaping, which gives government an excuse to spy on activists, label them as terrorists, and jail them. It's the same story when it comes to issues in her backyard. For example, on the environment, she has opposed the drilling in Alaska National Wildlife Refuge and drilling off the Washington coast, which is good, but her Energy Modernization Act of 2017, co-authored by Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, would expand fracking and fracked gas production on public land and in coastal waters. The bill doesn't even mention renewable solar or wind energy. Cantwell's stance on things like healthcare and education hurt the poor and people with modest incomes the most. Folks who are mainly women and children, people of color, including Native Americans and immigrants. Thus, the harmful positions she takes completely undercut her positive votes, for example, against banning late-term abortions. She might ask Senator Cantwell, we might ask her, right? Where's the introduction of a bill for student loan forgiveness or one for immigration reform that ends the raids and provides legal status for all? Our state needs a senator who will use the bully pulpit that Washington voters have entrusted to her to fight and help workers, family farmers, small business, students, immigrants, and the poor and homeless people survive and maintain a quality of life that everyone can enjoy, not just a handful of rich and powerful oligarchs that she seems to represent. Maria Cantwell is not that person, and sadly, we have invested too much time and faith in just one more corporate apologist Democrat. It's time for some real change and real hope, and that will only happen with, wait for it, real courage, real action, and real representation. And in that vein, we have 4 champions of progressive policy running to represent the people. So I'd like you to come into this conversation, Courtney, if you don't mind. We're just going to point out the 4 candidates that we have already taken a look at their vetting forms and did interviews with, running for on the progressive ticket in the Senate.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got Gigi, right? So Jennifer Gigi Ferguson.
Absolutely. She's a powerhouse.
She is a powerhouse. She has run in the past for congressional district.
Yeah, I think against Denny Heck. She's in.
Yes.
And I think she came pretty close. And I was recently at a meeting where someone gave her mad props for the fight that she waged against him.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to how these races continue. Steve Hoffman. So he's running as what again? The Socialist?
Freedom Socialist Party.
Socialist.
It's phrased in a way I wish I'd double checked before we started, but it's like a union and feminist party, or a workers and feminist party. It's a two-part, and I just remember the feminist part. It resonates. I don't know why, but I'm very impressed with all his credentials. He's been a union member for a long time, shop steward, etc., and his policies are solid.
Yes, they are. Dave Strider is also running this cycle. Dave's actually kind of made it kind of big out there because of his name, right?
Right.
Cartoon character?
Something like that. I don't get the reference, so I have to. I let it slide because I don't get it. But he's big on modern money theory, MMT.
Yes, MMT.
Yeah. And so I think a lot of his outside of state support that he's gathering, and it's vast, is through the community that talks about MMT.
Right. And go ahead.
I think so I'm in Tacoma in CD6, and then on either side of me I have CD10, and I think Gigi's on to the left of me and Dave's to the right of me. Stuck in the middle with you.
See, there you go. And then we have Jeremy Tootin, who actually lives in the eastern Washington.
Yeah, near Tri-Cities. He's a fantastic scientist. I think he has a different perspective than the rest of them in that because he's in central Washington, he has a very red community, so he knows the language they use and what it means and how to use their language to explain his platform.
Right, and he's running as a justice party, so not justice. She's not Justice Dem,
Justice Party.
Justice Party. So actually, none of them are running as a Democrat. So Gigi is an independent.
Yep, I think Dave's an independent as well.
Right. Wow, what a nice mixture.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to let everybody know to tune in. It's called Our Burnin' Senate Sound Off. So all four of these amazing candidates will be coming together, and we will be doing a roundtable. So if you have any questions that you want to make sure you would like to be asked, please just email them to WashingtonBerniecrats@gmail.com.
Or join us.
Yes, there is a link. Find us on Facebook. All the links are also down below. So join us for that. It's really important. And then we're going to make our final decision on who ends up getting the full endorsement.
Yeah,
this is Berniecrats, Our Revolution.
Yeah, this is the final step in our vetting and endorsement process for this office. And they've all been vetted and endorsed as a Berniecrat. So we honor their progressive nature and we value it. And so we felt that in a situation where there are multiple quality candidates, there's two angles. We didn't want to dilute our endorsement by dual endorsements or multiple endorsements. At the same time, we want to recognize that the policy is in the right place. And so we came up with a two-step endorsement. You first get endorsed as a Berniecrat, and then you get endorsed for the race.
Yeah, so please don't miss out on that. Are there any questions out there regarding anything we've just talked about, Courtney?
Well, I got a little distracted, Mostly it's just awesome words of support. And there was a small list of plays on her name. Maria Can't Do Well, Ne'er Do Well, just a few. Excuse me. And
I love our audience.
Me too.
Thank you again.
Indeed.
Keep talking.
Yeah. DNC equals RNC equals Wall Street War Party. So, question. Doesn't it follow that if so many people are running against a corporate-controlled Democrat like Maria Cantwell, she isn't doing the job in the best interest of people in Washington State?
I think it might be a good indication, but I'm also of the belief that nobody should ever go unopposed either.
Exactly.
So.
Right. But Maria Cantwell has definitely misused her position, in even if it's misuse in like the omission, like a lie of omission versus a stated lie. It's like her crimes are of inaction. There's crimes of action and crimes of inaction, and some of her inaction is slaying me, dog. I need some help here.
Right. Isn't that true? Anything else out there?
That's it does say question above by Mo Levy. So let me just see if I can scroll up. Unless she's talking about Oz's question that I just read just above her statement.
I don't see another one.
Yeah, I think it might be that. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone, for those questions. We really appreciate that. We had a pretty good last weekend.
Yes, we did. It was fantabulous. And in Vancouver, your area, you were the hostess with the mostest.
We did ask all of our progressive candidates that we've endorsed to please join us in Vancouver, which is Southwest Washington, this last weekend in support of Dorothy Gasquet. She has an amazing office. It's beautiful. And yeah, everybody was able to be very well represented. It was a wonderful thing. Getting all these people together always reinvigorates the feeling and the reason why we're fighting. And it also makes us, truly know that we're not alone and we still have a lot of fight to do, and we have help to do it. We plan on having more of these socials where we get all of the progressive candidates together. We're trying for at least once a month, so stay tuned. Courtney, you can talk about the next one that we're looking at getting together.
I'm sadly underinformed about it, because I'm doing it and I'm not doing it well. No, I'm struggling with finding a place, and also there's a few other activities that day that will be taking the attention of the union away from it. So sadly, I think I think I'm going to fail at trying to blend them, and but we're still gonna do it, even if it means hanging out in my front yard. I got a 1/4 acre, homie. We can do this. But don't look at the inside of the house, please, or the outside for that matter. But May 5th, the day before the Red Berets Medicare for All March, and I will reiterate every opportunity I have. Tacoma is divided primarily between two congressional districts, but Pierce County is divided between 4 of them. And it's odd because in CD6 and CD10, the bulk of their voting constituents are in Pierce County. So Tacoma-Pierce has more influence than anywhere else in the state because we influence 2 congressional district elections. So it is of the utmost importance that those in Tacoma-Pierce know what is going on and what their options are. And I am trying my best. Well, okay, it might not be the best, but I am trying my hardest to get that out there, and I will take any local help available, and I look forward to hearing from people, and I look forward to seeing people because we will pull this off, and we're excited. Bring your instruments because we'll probably have a casual jam session.
We need that. I love the casual jam sessions. So upcoming events. So we've got Dorothy Gasquet She has, of course, coffee and conversations with Dorothy. She has those frequently, so go to her website to get updated on all the upcoming coffee dates with her. But the next one that's coming up that will be really fun is called May the 4th Be With You. So May 4th, again, at her headquarters. Don't miss out, and all the information is below on that and on her website. We've got Tyler Vega. So Jefferson County Progressives. He's going to be joining them Saturday, April 28th at 6 p.m. at the Quilcene. Is that how you pronounce it? Quilcene Community Center. Quilcene. We are still gathering signatures. I just want to say this for all of them. So if you're in the general vicinity and you may not have time to, stay, just go in and give a signature. We so appreciated. Don't even know.
We are doing a signature gathering. You can go directly to Tyler Vega's website and download a signature form, sign it, and mail it back to him. Or do one better. There's 10 lines on those filing fee petitions. Get 9 neighbors, family members, friends. We don't care. You have to do CD specific signatures though at this time. So do it for Tyler, do it for Sarah, do it for Dorothy, do it for Robert, do it for Tambourine.
Thank you. Yes, very important. Sarah Smith, some upcoming events. So there's community canvassing in South Seattle, April 28th. Van Asselt Playground is where that will be. And then again, more updates and more events. You can find those on facebook.com, Sarah Smith, WA09. Nice. Robert Huntzinger. Oh, go ahead.
I feel like you always put an NG in there. I love it.
I do. I apologize, Robert.
Yeah, but keep it up because at least you're consistent.
Right, I try. He has a lot of things coming up. He's got canvassing in Pierce County on the 29th and the 30th and the 1st.
Yes.
Nice. And then May 1st as well, there's a Graham Town Hall, and it'll be with 2 uncorruptible candidates. Who are those?
Tambourine and Robert.
What a great.
And everything.
Uncorruptible or uncorrupted? Let's just clarify.
Uncorrupted, I apologize. I like incorruptible.
Yes. Thank you, John. And so we have, 2 uncorrupted candidates. I'm trying to encourage our candidates to do double events when the area abuts the other's district, so that people from both sides of the district line can come to one place in their community, because they're neighbors. They just have an invisible line dividing them. And so come one, come all.
And then on the 8th, who's that with?
The same. That's the
Tambourine?
edge where 8, with Tambourine, 10 and 8 match a butt there on it.
Wonderful.
In East Pierce.
Thank you, Courtney, for those updates.
You're welcome. Yes.
And then, of course, signature gathering events for I-1600 Universal Medicare for All. There's many everywhere. So
oh my gosh. Yeah.
Go to Yes on I-1600.
There should be a signing event, a signature gathering event, wherever you are, in that you are carrying petitions to gather the signatures. This cannot be done by ourselves. Everyone has to chip in.
Exactly. Oh, okay. So we got through the events, and it's about that time to roll out the final music.
Yeah. And so I hope everyone noticed the title of this show, Sawant a Revolution. The other one was a little too long, which was So You Say Sawant a Revolution. So that's where we're going with the music here, people.
And John kind of said something about that name.
Well done with your punnery there, guys. I
Thank
hope
you.
Sawant knows. So we can go out, but I'm going to tell everybody this is a Warner Brothers video, and I know the audio probably clears, but I really doubt the video does. So we're just going to run credits while we listen to the audio. All right.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, John.
Okay. Thanks, John.
Thank you all for joining again today. See you next time.
Next week.